this is what you need to do from my experience, and held me to the line. He was my swim buddy through a lot of this stuff and wasn't my sponsor. And I think that that's very, very inherent to the program, that you find a running partner to go through these things with, because it boils down to accountability. It
Yeah.
boils down to holding yourself to a standard that you're giving to yourself, but allowing others to impact you. And I think that that's what we do really well in SEALs in recovery as well.
All right. Good morning, John, SEALs in Recovery alcoholic. This is our 7th podcast. I have a man that I greatly respect, Rich C. He can talk about his last name if he wants to, but Rich has got a great story. Was a SEAL, got out, before retirement. Business owner, father, very successful, and he'll talk about how he found SEALs in Recovery. But administrative note: if you're watching this, please subscribe, mash subscribe, and give us 5 stars. That'll help the algorithm to get this to some other people that might need it. So, Rich, I'm going to ask you 4 to 5 questions to start off, and then we can go into your story, as deep as you want to go, or as light as you want to go. But the highlights are, we just discussed pre-recording here, is that kind of wondering what this is. What this is somebody's story. What happened to them, how they got to their lows, their bottoms, whatever floor they got off, and what they do to correct it and where they are now. So, first question, Rich, where are you from?
Let's get to the grit. I was born in New York, and apparently from questions that I've had of my parents, I was adopted when I was age 4. We lived in Long Island, and I
We're in
was
Long
born at
Island.
Islip Hospital is where I was born. And
I was born
uh,
on Long Island, and
you,
Islip is a par 5 away from Patchogue, where I grew up. So
that's
go ahead.
right. And we played in some of the same hockey rinks, I think, at some
Yeah,
point in our days. But
yeah.
I didn't live there very long before we moved over to Iran, and at that point, my whom I call mom and dad adopted me.
Hmm.
And that's just a little recon with I have siblings that are much older than me, and they've shared that story with me. Apparently my mom was a heroin addict, and very young when she had me, and she died shortly after she had me. She was 16 when she had me. Dad was 21,
Hmm.
and mom died at 19, OD'd. So yeah, there's a lot more to that.
Well, we'll get into that. Question two.
Yeah,
Question two. What's your sobriety date?
January 4th of 2024, and I've had spells of 10 to 12 years of sobriety and it wasn't true sobriety. I think that I think we as alcoholics always find something to replace whatever the addition of alcohol can't give you. And I had a lot of dry goods in my story that were replacement, and continual use throughout the years where I wasn't drinking. So my true sobriety date, where I was clear of everything, every kind of toxin in my system, is January 4th, 2024.
All right. Bud's class.
I started when 163, and I was rolled back into 164 for pool comp.
That's interesting. I bring those two things up because you know how you could tell somebody's bullshitting about being sober or being in buds. When you ask an alcoholic what their sober date is, they know it right away. And then you ask
They
a SEAL
do.
what their fucking class number is, they know it right away. So that's a little disclaimer. If you want to know somebody if they're sober or a SEAL, it should
Well,
rattle off your tongue
at
right
the
off the bat.
inherently in every alcoholic is that, well, I want
Exactly.
to, and no, I had to. I picked up 6 white chips. For those of you that think that this is a one and done type situation, I actually, on my last bout, they ran out at my home group. They ran out of white chips one day, and I ran out to my freaking car where I kept all of the all of the chips that I collected. I picked up 3 9-month chips along the way. Um, it wasn't something that stuck, and my go-to aside from alcohol was weed, and I don't think that I'd quit smoking weed for probably 40 years. I ran smoking dope every day. So yeah, it was that was difficult for me to face, that I didn't have something to replace it. And we'll get more into that, because
Sure.
there is a true replacement that works a lot better.
Question
So
4, age, place,
I
type
am.
of first drink.
Oh, the
Your first encounter with alcohol, and what
my
was it? Where?
my first drink was about 9 years old, and it was vodka out of the freezer, because my old man was a 50-day alcoholic, and his 2 words of advice that he offered me was, A hard dick has no conscience, and B, there's nothing in the world that 3 fingers of vodka can't solve. And by that he meant just pouring that much vodka in a glass
Mhm.
and shooting it. So yeah, that was and it was ice cold vodka, a swig from the bottle out of the freezer, because if it worked for Dad, it worked for me.
Last question before we get into your story. Where do you live now?
I am 55 and I live in Greensboro, North Carolina. I have 4 boys,
Hmm.
and all of them are located. And the only thing that are holding me here, because at the heart and the root of it all, something that I really became at peace with, is I have a very nomadic spirit, and I
I
don't
see
know.
that.
I don't. There's some.
You've
There's
always been
some.
like that. It's one of your pluses, dude.
I don't. I don't know, man, because it's freaking lonely sometimes. I want to be. I raised my 4 boys, 2 of which I raised from infancy. As we did the business thing, uh, I have a lot to say, but I don't want to say about my relationship with my former wife. I was just divorced about 2 weeks ago, and I think it's the best move for the both of us. She's a fantastic spirit. She's extremely driven and extremely smart. But when and I don't know where to cut this off, but I was a commercial diver offshore in the Gulf for
Well,
years.
we're gonna do next is
All right.
what we're gonna do next is we're just gonna start. Uh, I want to know about your childhood. Iran is very interesting. Hopefully, you weren't there after 1979.
We actually were evacuated out on a C-130, and
Yeah, in '79.
we flew into France the day they took
Yeah.
the hostages. Yeah,
So, side
pretty
note:
cool shit.
if you ever meet anybody from Iran and they're in this country, you say, "Did you get out in '79?" Like, yeah, and they will tell you how they get out, because that's when the Shah was exiled
That's
and put in
it.
a hospital, and then that we know what exists now. So let's talk about Long Island. We could talk hockey if you want, and then up through what got you interested in the military, and then after that, what got you interested in going to BUDS and being a SEAL. So let's talk about what you remember as a child, what you realize now as your child, and what your lens looks like now, and then we'll bring
Oh,
it right up to
still a
being
kid.
BUDS.
I'm still a kid. I love it. And if I get off the rails, please throw me back on the highway. Keep me in between the lines, John. Okay, when I was born, and a lot of my, like, I've always felt this place of being misplaced.
Hmm.
And someone says, "Hey, we're a bunch of misfits that just happen to have this connection of being misfits." And I've always claimed to be a nomad, not fixed in one place. I went to 14 different schools in the 13 years of schooling that we go through, K to 12th grade. And that started and probably influenced why I live such a nomadic, or what my buddy Jim would say is a renegade life. Um, so when I was born in New York, I have 2 older sisters, and they're 16 and 13 years my senior, so they're almost adults compared to when I came in on board the family. But I wasn't adopted until later on, when I was in foster care for some time. And during that time frame, and I put the story together simply in sobriety. I never really gave a shit until I was sober. My dad apparently came and saw me every day, my natural father, until I was 2 years old. And so that would have made my mom 18 or so. And the deal that my adoptive father had was, if my natural father didn't bring my mom by, it was good to go.
Mm-hmm.
He could come see me and play with me and interact, and there was a true want on his part to do that, because he came quite frequently to see me as a baby. Excuse me. On my second birthday, he brought my mom, my natural mother, with him, and she had cleaned up. I don't know how much sobriety she had, but like I said, she was a dedicated heroin addict at the time. And at that point, my dad said, no more. You can't come and see him anymore. Um, Fast forward 2 years later, they were forced to do the adoption papers because they wanted to go out of country. My dad worked for Grumman Aerospace.
Yeah,
And
big employer on Long Island.
yeah, but I mean, even then, he had met a dude, and John needed to be in. One of the founders of Grumman was a complete drunk alcoholic, church skirt chasing individual, and my dad was in that. And that was back in the Mad Men era, where they smoked a lot of cigarettes, drank a lot, and everything was supposed to be that way, the way it was. But my dad and him met at a bar, and my dad never graduated sixth grade because he was part of that World War II generation. He was actually a navigator in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a lot of brains, but he didn't have the education. He didn't have the paper to prove that he was knowledgeable. But they sat down, and my dad started working on what was then CAD CAM, AutoCAD, modern day AutoCAD. And Grumman was developing the software for that. They were huge on the very cusp of engineering, and John Ryan was an MIT graduate that was one of the guys in the garage when Grumman started out, going, "Hey, how do we make our way?" They threw that program at my dad, and they said, "Hey, from a layman's perspective, we'll pay you to give us advices on how we can make this more user friendly." Very insightful guys for back then. Nowadays, it's commonplace that we do that, but that was a really original idea back in the day, to just get some dude off the street and say, "Hey, how can we do this three-dimensional presentation and make it more user friendly for you?" Of course, my dad, by attrition, just learned how that worked. Then when they made the deal to sell the F-14 Tomcats over to the Shah, whom I believe, now that I'm a little older and did history and dug into it, I believe he didn't even want the planes. He just wanted the engineering package that came with it. So when he bought the F-14s, it came with CAD CAM and the like. So they had these computer generated renditions so they could work on nuclear facilities. That's what my belief is to this day, because the F-14s weren't that big of a deal. Once you were in theater and actually looking at it, they were really trying to develop their engineering program, which was done in the 70s, early 70s. So that's how we ended up going over there. And even then, my dad was always he was always doing the first recons. He would leave for a year before we were, and we were left to my mom, and my mom had too much going on. And it brings to point something that we don't really speak about in Alcoholics Anonymous or in any other program, this huge burden of codependency. And it's been an area that I've had a lot of coaching in from the local guys here. I have a fantastic guy that owns his own business, and he's very, very successful. And he heard my story when I first presented. He kind of took me under his wing. He's the kind of guy that says, "Hey, show me where the sponsorship test is in the AA book, and I'll be willing to admit that I'm a sponsor. I'm here because I can go into a room and get sponsored by 40 people rather than just go to one resource." I do have one resource. I have a sponsor that has a sponsor. But in the end, I think that, much like the rest of my life, I can't expect to get all the wisdom from one source. Although I look for that kind of person all my life. I look for that old man image that I was just like, "Hey, I want to be like him when I grow up." And it's interesting because I actually brought that up as a topic matter for one of the discussion meetings that we were having. Hey, what happened to all the idols and role models that we had when we were kids? Where did they all go? And it was pretty funny to hear his shares on that. But nonetheless, he's been kind of like that. And I've got about I've got about 4 of those guys that are go-to, that I can go bounce off. Hey, you know, I have my rabbit ass mind thinking this thought, or but he is very, very into the codependency aspect of things. And it's one of the things that he'll bring into almost every meeting that he goes into. And something that I learned as a child growing up with mom and dad and their relationship, and that misogynistic male figure, if you will. Yeah. So going into Iran, we lived there. We moved 3 different times. Tehran, Shahanshah, and Isfahan. We lived in.
Yeah,
And
I'm aware. Yeah, not aware.
okay,
I know the geography.
just yeah,
I
yeah.
work with the Kurds, so
So very, very familiar in there, and honestly, it had a huge impact on me as a child. I don't know how deep we want to get into this, but I learned the duality of man at about 8 years old, probably 1 year prior to the first drink that I ever had. And there's a lot of bullshit stories that I have that people like to hear. And to me, um, you know, I'm just me. I've got me and my story and what I and if people get value out of it, I try to share it. The interesting thing in specifically when I was living in Shahanshah, no one. I was raised in a compound, and every team guy will know. You know, Bob Wire, and you know we got our security out there, and that's how I was raised. They had 6 guys that would rove our neighborhood. It was surrounded by about a 20-foot wall, 18, 20 feet tall on one side, and then about 6 feet on the other side. And it brought me to, at a very young age, believe in the illusion of safety. I was like, that wall ain't going to stop anybody from coming in. I don't know what you're trying to pull. But I found that out simply because I would leave the compound and I was on a bike. And they had Happy Days back in the day when I was a kid coming up, and I would get on my bike and I was the Fonz and I wore a Fonzie shirt. And this in Farsi means what the middle finger does in the US, but it's a tremendous amount more disrespectful. They don't use it like we use it over here as an ongoing gag. And when I would wear the shirt at first, when I would pedal my little Schwinn bicycle downtown, and this, I'm sorry, is Isfahan, downtown Isfahan, I'd go by the mosque and I'd go to the bazaars, and I was the only white kid in that probably had ever been there. And when I wore that shirt, all the business owners would cover up their face because it was so profane to them. And and I didn't, 8 years old, I didn't know a whole, you know, I don't know what they were doing. And I'd go in and I'd buy gum, and as any 8-year-old, there's little girls in there that would run out to see me, and I would get value out of that. And I'd give the business owners a smile. And you know, not long after me doing that, with the frequency of trips, they were actually step outside of their businesses and do this to me, like, and mean it in like the Americanized way versus this taboo. Hey, this little kid, they actually grew to know and like me. The flip side of that coin was I go over the wall on the backside of our compound, and there was one of the few little watering holes where there's like reed grass and frogs and stuff like that
Mhm.
was on the backside of that wall. And I'd stack up, like I get a dog house, and then I put a pallet on top of that, and then a chair on top of that, and then I would climb up this 18, 20-foot wall, and I'd get over the top of it, and I go out, and there was a 6-foot drop on the other side of the wall. So it was like, you know, when you pull into the gates of the compound, there's those 18, 20-foot walls, and they had dug out the back. The engineers had dug out the facility, the whole building neighborhood, of which there was probably about 40 homes. They had dug that whole area out and had built that wall, and it was like a retainer. But from our side, it looked real safe because it was so tall. On the other side, it was just like I could, as an 8-year-old, just jump up, grab the wall, and pull myself up and climb over the thing. Anyway, I went over the wall and I would go gig frogs. And the first time that I did it, I heard this, and I would hear splashing. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I looked over, and there was people shooting at me. These same people that I was going downtown, and I was seeing, you know, were shooting at me from, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of a mile or so. And I was like, hell, this is pretty exciting. And I jumped back over the wall, and as I was jumping back over that little section of wall, I would see the concrete impact from the bullets that were hitting it. I was like, this is freaking cool. So I don't know if it was the team guy, but I felt really alive at that point. Again, you go on my side of the compound and there's guys with AKs walking around for our security. And that was just like a commonplace thing for me. We tend to, as human beings, get used to what our environment indicates. And we think, because it's my experience, it's everyone's experience. Everyone's going to get the same, everyone. What do you mean you didn't see tracer fire when you were a kid? Or that was just normal, commonplace shit for me. When we were evacuated, I was sitting on the back balcony. Let me finish the story about the wall. So we did that. I did that. And then the kids were like, hey, what the hell is going on over there? The kids in the neighborhood, some were 16, some of them were 12, some were younger than me. They were like, hey, what were you doing over there? And I was like, I was just gigging frogs. And they were like, yeah, we heard this noise. And I was like, okay. So in ensuing weeks, they said, hey, can we go back there? And I was like, sure, let's go back there. I build my little doghouse, pallet, chair thing, climb the wall, and they climb the wall behind me. We jump over, and not minutes after we started walking towards those reeds, they started shooting at us again. Well, most of the group, and in reflection, it kind of points out an alcoholic mind or a team guy mind as opposed to just a normal population. They all ran around the front of the fucking neighborhood to go in through the gate, like the actual entrance to the neighborhood. And I went, me and a buddy that was 16, senior to me, we jumped over the wall. So his name was Burke, and I had more in my story where I ran into him later, and we had some shared incidents of use while we were in Iran because alcohol is taboo there. It seems inconsistent in my story, but my dad would go to the PX, buy cases of vodka, bring it back to the house. So he had his stash. He's an alcoholic. And Burke was one of those guys that was like, hey, he's got the stash. He's got the stash. I actually came back to when I was about 8 years old, I came back to the compound after going out in town, and I smelled like dope, and he smelt it on me. He said, hey, dude, why do you smell like that? And I was just like, well, I went by this place where they sell bread, and that's where it smells like this. He actually had me bring him downtown and show, score his little matchbook full of hash infused with opium. And that was the kind of shit that was normal, commonplace to me. But nonetheless, it was funny that he and I jumped over the wall, and the rest of the kids, they went through the front gate because they were like, and that kind of put a kibosh on us going over the wall and getting what I come to find is adrenaline rush out. So when we left, we were evacuated out. As I said, we were evacuated out when they took the hostages. We left everything, and I remember having just like a little kid backpack that I took, and we went out on a C-130 and we went into France. But before we did that, they actually part of the evacuation was we went into Tehran to wait for the plane for the next day. And when we got to Tehran, they put us up in this 5-star hotel downtown Isfahan or downtown Tehran. And I went out to the balcony at like 3:00 in the morning, the morning that we were evacuated out. And I was watching this tracer fire just go left and right out just sitting on a balcony on a concrete wall. And my mom came out and she was just like, what the hell are you doing? It was like she was afraid for me, but I was like, this is the neatest shit that I've ever seen. And there's something about seeing these visual things, and any team guy can relate to this, and the actual impact of the frequency of what's going on, that feeling part of what we don't experience when we go see it on a TV screen or a movie theater or when we're telling a story. You don't get that you can feel the blood in the back of your throat type feeling if you're not experiencing it for real. And that was my first true exposure to a battlefield or conflict, or call it what you will, warring factions. And it was just like I was completely fixed at that age on, holy shit, that is really, really radical. And my mom came out scared to death, white as a sheet, well, oh my God, my poor baby, you know, you're traumatized for the rest of your life. And that was just appealing to me. We moved France, England, came back to the US, and that was pre-computers. So there was stuff like we were smuggled across from Canada. We would fly into Mexico, and there's the reason that we were doing that was, if you stayed outside the US, and I don't know how many people have this experience or knowledge, so I'm just going to share it. If you stayed outside of the US at that time, then your tax money wasn't paid. You didn't have to pay federal taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad making $60,000 over in Iran was like him making 100,000 in the US because he wasn't paying tax on that money. So we were smuggled in and out, and he would do odd end jobs when we came back to the US. And then we ended up going to Singapore under the same guys. So we ended up going to Singapore, and I moved over to Singapore I guess the beginning of my sophomore year of high school. And over in Singapore, it's against the law to smoke dope, and I was pretty keen on that. And just to clear up the hockey rink stuff, I was coached by a German medalist when I lived in Iran in swimming, because I was a freaking hellion. And there's lots that I could go on there. I don't want to bore anybody, but she saw at a very, very young age that I had a huge enthusiasm and energy level. And she put me in a pool 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night. And I became pretty proficient in the water. I mean, I was an amazing swimmer, because we didn't have access to the traditional baseball. I played baseball a little bit when I was a kid. I could never hit a ball, so they wouldn't change the rules of the strike zone, so I had to go find another sport. I ended up doing a lot of swimming, and then when I came back to the U.S., I really wanted to play lacrosse. For some reason, I had an internal drive, and it's funny because my kid's a face-off guy for Methodist, and he's in the top 30 right now in D3 schools, so he does a pretty good job. Moreover, he's a great team member binder, because I preached that to him from a very young age. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, I started playing hockey because I could play hockey, and I could play hockey high. I could smoke dope and go out and do an amazing job. As a matter of fact, I played better when I was stoned, because I just took it for what was in that minute. I didn't have any plan of past. Hey, the past experience dealing with this guy was rough, or looking into the future, I'm doing this for. I played hockey stoned, and I was very quick. I was very agile, and I loved to freaking hit. So at the end of the day, I was doing this sport where I was able to give aggression and not take any, because most people couldn't hit me. Now, when they did get the chance, as you do in hockey, yeah, you put the guy to the wall. You make sure that you plant his face to the glass. But that was actually the big motivator as to why I got involved in hockey, because I could do it and I could be under the influence. And
it was that back on Long Island?
Yeah. Well, we returned to Long Island when I was 15, 16, because my parents always maintained a house in there, and they were renting it while they were gone. So when we came back, 15, 16, all the kids that I knew grew in. Like when I left at 4 years old from preschool and that shit, I didn't stay in contact with any of those people. I never wrote letters or did anything. So when I came back, I saw all those people, and there was always a premise of me remembering who they were. And I think that some of them, most of them, the majority of them female, they had better recall, because they were like, we know you. And I actually had a little girl named Gail that was in there. And when I came back, we came back for a year of school when Matt was in, my little brother was in 3rd grade, and I was 5th grade. We came back for like not quite a year, maybe 8 months. And we went to a Catholic school while we were there. I don't know how they organized that, my parents, but like almost within the first week, they had a dryer box that they put around my desk when I came back for that little 8 month. And that same girl, Gail, cut a little window in the back of my dryer box because I guess I was out of hand back then. And she's like, "Hey, I just didn't want you to be alone." And I thought that was funny and stuff. But Matt was in 3rd grade, so I was probably in 5th grade or something.
What is a
like
dryer
that.
box?
Like what you ship a dryer in.
Oh, that's where they would put you in Catholic school?
A big fucking box so they can keep me by.
So
they can keep
that
me
was your
by.
punishment?
Oh yeah, among
This is
other
just
things.
fucking put us out in the hallway at public school.
No. I was one of those that was notoriously up there, and that was back in the day where they could actually spank you and stuff.
Oh
And
yeah.
I got spankings, and it's funny that I'm averting the fact that I was the kind of kid that knew where all the hospitals were, no matter where we were, because my parents didn't want to bring me to the same hospital because then the
Protective
CCS,
Service would investigate your parents.
they would go and say, "Hey, why is Dad being so heavy-handed?"
Do you remember the rinks you played in?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember the hockey rinks you played in?
Milan? No. Miller Place?
Miller Place was deck hockey.
Played there, deck hockey.
Miller Place was behind Plaza Sports. The rinks growing up was Superior Ice Rink in Kings Park. There was a shitty ass ice rink in Copeg. It was half a sheet of ice in a basement. It was called Rollin' Ice. Then you had Dix Hills Country Club.
Really low ceiling. Yeah.
Yes, it was horrible. And then they had Oyster Bay. Had a Oyster Bay hockey. Had an outdoor rink. And believe it or not, there was in an old Fairchild hangar over by Grumman on 110. There was a 3-rink facility that the Islanders used to practice.
Now I've been out there, but I never played out there.
Yeah, that one under Caniac Park was another one. It was a public venue. But
and then I'm back in the year chasing thing because when I was playing, that was that 15, 16 year age where I was just trying to. And the Islanders were on a winning streak back then, so a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't talk about those days because I'm a Ranger fan. I don't need to hear about all the cups they won in a row. I'm still dealing with that as a 61-year-old man. So,
it does provide a spark for kids. And hey, I want to be like that when I grow up.
Oh, it was a dynasty. It was just that team was insane.
Yeah, but look where we ended up with that mentality. It does influence us. And going back to my share about, hey, who'd you want to be when you grew up? That was part of
there was
who we had as role models. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot. There's school was different then. It was like, my mom was very sick in high school and died. And like, my wife's like, who took care of you? Well, my brother and sister kind of did. Who's your lead guardian? I said, I had none. But the community service was amazing with a lot of male teachers were in my school. There were Vietnam vets that went to school with the GI Bill and became teachers because the teachers back then that truly had the summers off. So I'm not going to say they were totally heavy-handed. It did grab you and give you the shoulder pinch or the ear twist or the arm twist, but they were very stern. They told you what time it is. They knew what life was about. Unfortunately, teachers can't do that with kids now because there'll be lawsuits. But yeah, it was.
But there's a paradox established there in acceptance,
Yeah, of course.
And we were raised in that, hey, self-accountability, and if you do get out of line, someone's going to correct you. I get that.
I got no problem with it. That's my kids, if they're the 2 or older ones in junior and high school, but like if they're in trouble, I'm like, well, I didn't do it. I'm like, well, who the fuck were you hanging around with? You're guilty by association. You are guilty till you're not guilty. Now you see parents, well, my kid didn't do anything. It's somebody else's fault. That's part of society that's really dwindling today with accountability, as is in rooms in AA.
It most definitely is, but there has to be those people in place that keep. I mean, we open the conversation with, "Hey, John, keep me in between the lines, please. Keep me on the highway. I don't want to be." No, but I mean that should be a societal norm as well, but it's not.
I can remember. I could remember after my mom passed, and it was November of my senior year, and she had been sick prior to that, incapacitated. And I can remember them sending work home for me because we had to take care of my mom because we couldn't afford hospice. So we had to do all things necessary with a dying individual, change diapers, everything else. And, it was, this is my own, pity party. But the thing is, like, they gave me like a week after my mom died, my teachers, that, one came to my house and said, look, you need to get it going here. You have a few months of school left. We're going to help you as much as we can, but it's time, it's time to get back in school and get amongst it. Time to get back on the ice. You're the captain of your hockey team. It's time to start functioning life. And without that jump start, I don't know where it would have been. Without that push from behind to say, hey, let's, like you say, get back on the highway. I mean, I don't know where I would have been. My accountability is I want to get good grades because I want to play ice hockey, and I want to play ice hockey after school. And I did. I, went out west and played for a while and got cut when in the Navy, United States Hockey League. But those things, that mentorship, and just like sponsorship and shooting buddies and swim buddies in AA, it is so important. And one of the things I'll talk about for a second is, and I talk about this with my sponsor, is and talk about with the old timers in your groups at home. The accountability to me in the 14 years, just about 14 years I've been sober, has gone is nothing. It's okay to go out, just pick up another fucking white chip. I remember meetings like people picking up white chips and somebody sharing, like, if you're picking up a white chip every week, probably what you're doing is not working. You might want to try something else or go back to drinking.
Yeah.
Now it's just okay. Now you're making it's okay for everybody to go out all the time. And I share about this all the time. Like, I don't want to be stuck in AA. I don't want to hide in AA. I don't want to be that guy that comes in and shares and says, oh, you know what? I just beat my wife up, got fired from my job. My car got repoed, but I'm still sober. And that's what
Why?
it's become. A lot of this stuff is so soft, brother. And you're not soft. That's why I love you. And it just drives me nuts. You're not helping the person. You're saying it's okay to keep going out and what you're doing is okay. I got this guy in not a home group, but I go to the meetings a lot. Like, this guy is like, this guy could literally quote the big book, any page, man. He's a savant. He's just an AA intellectual. He cannot stay sober. The 14 years I've been going to that group, he's picked up probably 30, 40 white chips. The other day he stops me. He's out on a run. He comes back in. I got him playing ice hockey. He played hockey as a kid. He's not very good, but I got him involved in this SEAL hockey shit that I started with Ryan Crowley, where we have our meetings at right now. And he wants to tell me about his started playing hockey again. I said, dude, I don't give a shit about your hockey. What the fuck's going on with your sobriety, bro? You keep picking up white chips. Who's your sponsor? What are you doing? I don't give a shit about you playing hockey. He was on his heels. But sometimes you have to give the message to people. It's just not okay what you're doing. It isn't, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Not trying to take his inventory, but it's unbelievable.
But I think that's why he's coming to you. He sees something in you that he believes will work for him. And I mean, I've dealt with a lot of guys that they can quote scripture and verse in the big book anytime, any day, but without the authenticity of their shares, without them bringing to the table exactly what we're discussing. Hey, how'd you get where you're getting, and what's your thought process? It doesn't bring that human component to it. So it's, hey, I'm going to go back out and I'm going to get sauced up because I just want to be absent from the way that I feel. And I actually I was turned on to feelings which we didn't allow ourselves to do. I think within every team guy, there's a switch, and I call it a conscience switch, because that's exactly what I learned when I was a kid getting beat by dad. Hey, turn that shit off, because it's not going to matter in the morning. He's going to guilt redemption use. He'll be at the redemption stage tomorrow where he's trying to make it up to you. So just hit the switch for now. And I think a lot of us as team guys have that switch internally built into us. I don't know if it's a psychological tool or what the psychiatric community would deem that, but we turn it off. We turn it off so we can get done what needs to be done. We put these blinders on and all we see is the goal, and bodies start dropping along the way as we're going to get the goal. It doesn't matter to us.
Right.
And I think that's what this guy sees in you. He sees that you have that capacity to turn off his conscience, but you're not doing it. And he's probably questioning, how are you keeping the feeling switch on all the time, John? Why do you not want to check out and be absent from all of this overwhelming emotion that you're feeling? And I think
Well,
it
because I
has.
want to stay sober because I know what the other side looks like. I remember one of the guys, I remember him calling me, and he was in new sobriety, few 5-6 months in. And he, you know, how end of training, stow the weapons, stow the comms, sensitive stuff. We're going to go buy a bunch of beer and we're going to have a, you know, fire, you know, what we used to do, right? And of course, people start fighting with each other and it becomes a fist fight and everybody kisses and hugs after that. But, you know, he was in charge of the training trip and he was like, you know, I'm really feeling uneasy about today because training's over, everything's done, Rangers are closed down, we're gonna have our, you know, party. I'm like, dude, one thing, remember your last drunk and what it did. He goes, up, cured, I got it. That's all he needed to hear. What did it look like the last time you drink and whether the shits show you with your family and work? Got it, no problem. I'm a designated driver. Thank you very much. But that connectivity hurts. It helps so much, you know. The other interesting thing about the civilian groups in our group is, and I'll get back to your story, I just think this is very important. There is no way I can go out and drink for many reasons. Besides, I love my wife and my kids. I got to face you fuckers. I don't want that shit. I don't want to face Doug and you and Steve, and I don't want to come in and with my tail between my legs, man.
Group of drunks.
I don't want that to happen. So that segues me to, I know a lot about your story and you're coming out of it, and I love it. I know Evan, and he shared it. He lost his wife. Doug lost kids. We have a myriad of problems, just like the civilian sector, and they're not drinking over it. So I shared this. And so good luck in our group saying, well, I'm special. This happened to me because between class 51 Mike and the
Yeah.
300s, there's nothing we can't cover down on. What we do have in our group is guys who've been through everything. So good luck me coming in say, I did because of X. Well, somebody just lost a wife, somebody lost a kid, somebody lost a multiple $1 million businesses like you did, and has come out on the other side. Civilian sector is, I know as many people that have as many problems. So what I shared is I'm sick of hearing people going out with any excuse to go out. Oh, my friend died that I hadn't seen in a year, but he died. I'm going to go out drinking. Somebody pissed me off at work. Oh, I'm going out drinking. So I couple that with good luck in this group in my morning meeting is telling the psychologist whose son committed suicide, the business owner that got scammed out of millions of dollars of business that was doing the right thing and didn't drink over it, the person that fought tooth and nail for 2 years to get weekend custody of her kids
Yeah.
isn't drinking over it, and you're drinking over what? Go tell them your story, because they'll throw that shit right back in your face and tell you how they got through it. And that's the issue with connectivity in AA. If you're having a problem, go talk to somebody. Or go to 7 meetings in 7 days. My sponsor, my late sponsor, Butch Vane, would say, go to 7 meetings in 7 days. You're going to hear what you need to hear. I believe that. Or just pick the phone up, that heavy phone, and call somebody, and they're going to tell you what time it is, why you shouldn't drink. But it's the weakness in AA is just currently just drives me crazy compared to what it used to be. And I don't care that drugs are
societal, though.
well,
It's
it is.
societal,
It
John.
is society. Here's another thing, and I got over this shit, you know, going to meetings out in LA and California. It's like they're AA meetings, they're NA meetings, right? I've gotten over this. It's not a resentment anymore. So we have the ketamine kids in our group, and we have different kinds of people, and I respect it all. But I used to have such a hard time, Rich, with people starting to share their drug problems in AA because it's AA. Back when I came in, they would let you share about your drugs, and then it would say, you know, group announcement. If you need to go to a NA meeting, go ahead. This is not the format to talk about drugs.
Singleness of purpose.
Correct. It got blurred along the lines a lot. And, you know, I don't mind it so much. I mean, there's a couple guys in our group that do talk about what they were doing besides alcohol. And I don't feel resentful anymore over it, but I used to. You know, I'm just talking about some of the differences I've seen in my tenure in AA. I'm sorry I got off the highway for a minute. And,
You're good.
Back to you. So you graduate high school. How do you get interested in the Navy and diving and all that?
Okay, so really important point. My drinking over in Singapore grew exponentially because I couldn't smoke weed. If you could smoke weed over in Singapore, then they pack your whole family up and they send you home. That was contingent. And then in the schools over there in the Singapore American School District, they actually have random drug analysis they give you, so you can't. Wow. As a student, like my junior senior year, that I think I was I was a troublemaker, so I got probably a little bit more frequently tested than others. But my drinking went through the roof over there because I can remember getting into a fight with one of the business owners there because I came up and there was a round table of 8-year-olds that were getting served Anchor beer. They had quarts of beer sitting on the table, and I was just like, my drinking. Even then, in my yearbooks, it says, "Hey, you got a problem," from my friends that I used to run with, and so yeah, that probably really took the cap off of me ever getting away from alcohol. Because I would stop in the morning at the stalls there at Ferris Stalls on the way to school, and I would get a quart of beer, and then after school, after football practice, we'd sit and drink four quarts, or it was just like the normal thing to do. And the first time I ever went to jail was in Singapore. I was playing football. We went and bought peanut butter and jelly after football practice there, and I whipped a loaf of bread to my buddy who was standing down the aisle. And when we went to check out, they let us pay for all the peanut butter and the bread because we were just buying it because we were starving. And then as we were leaving the store, 4 cops, 2 on each side, came up, grabbed us underneath the arms, and walked us down to the local jail, and we had to make the awkward phone calls to Dad. And my dad, LaRue was my running partner. He actually his dad came, picked him up, took him home, and my dad said, "Hey, have a good night." And just the difference in philosophies, I guess. So the first time that I ever really I was sitting in jail there going, it's wow, how is this my fault? How is this my fault? Typical thoughts there. So we came back, and we moved down to Florida, and I was constantly in trouble when we came back from Singapore. We moved down to, and my sister still lives in Gainesville. I was always a worker. I was working for a moving company when I lived over in Singapore, simply because it afforded me the luxury of going to travel in that area. And my parents weren't the kind to give me something for nothing. They, everything that I got was, I bought my own, if I wanted new pants or shoes, or that was all stuff that I did. And when I moved to Florida, I was really alone, really. My mom, in that codependent relationship that she had structured, spent a lot of time chasing my dad down, following him to bars and doing that kind of thing. And when we got to Florida, I wasn't one of those kids that had a lot of parental investment. I'll just say it. I'll just say it that way. A lot of the life lessons that I learned were like you were referencing earlier. Thankfully, in New York, they had some counselors. Thankfully, I met that German lady. And
you had some people around you, coaches, teachers, whatever.
And I think that in reflection, that's what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to give back what those people have given to me. And I've got a list of them, as much as we do resentments in AA, I try to look back on the foundation of, hey, how did you get, where did you get? And I mean, there's a lot of self resentments in that, because I had some spectacular fucking team guys try to invest in me. We'll get to that part, maybe not. That still to this day rips my heart open. And hey, how could you not see what they were trying to do for you? Because I have all the gifts. But anyway, when we moved to Florida, I was very disconnected. I was very very removed from school. I didn't feel like I had any place with chicks, although I looked to females for attention. Scholastically, I was a C student, although I had the potential, and I was constantly reminded by my dad, "Hey, you're so much smarter than this." Um, I just felt very displaced and not. I didn't really feel like I fit in, especially coming back from a really foreign base experience where people had commonalities such as music or athletics or sports teams that bound them together. I didn't. What I did believe is in nationalism. I had a huge feeling for the United States that most people don't, and I'm going to say it, that they don't have. There's not nationalism felt on a level that I could feel because I had exposure and I knew what true poverty was. I knew what it was to do without. I knew what lack of healthcare systems. I saw it firsthand. And now I'm a little older, in reflection, it's completely different. But I saw it even at that young age that, hey, these people don't even know what they've got.
They don't.
And I find that I had this very overwhelming sentiment to protect what I call red, white, and blue. And I had a fantastic team guy that was a psychology major. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say his name or
Yes,
not,
you are.
but Richard McCarthy.
Mhm.
He was so very influential, and his idea of what this country should be was much in line with what I thought it should be. Even returning to Florida at that age, I was just like, I felt very displaced. But I was approached by a lot of recruiters at that time, and I mean, I was like doing lifeguard and shit in Florida, and I was doing a whole bunch of I would sneak out of skip. As a matter of fact, it cost me later, but I would skip my English class last period and go to the beach and go surf, and I'd get high, and I was in a really dark place at that point, and I was approached by a lot of Marine Corps, Air Force recruiters at that age, and because of my strong swimming background, I started to think about all of these facets, and then the Navy recruiter approached me, "Hey, do you want to be one of these guys?"
Mhm.
And I was like, "Well, what are these guys?" And if you go back to when I was that age, there wasn't literature or commonplace team guys out there saying. As a matter of fact, I actually talked to my sponsor about me coming on this podcast. I'm like, "Hey, isn't this shit about attraction rather than promotion? And
Oh,
don't
this
I have
attracts
all?"
people. They want to hear your story.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, John, I put you in that paradox where you're like, "Hey, Jocko's doing this shit and he's making a mint off of it. I got an issue with that."
I don't
And
think we're making a mint on this, brother.
but no, but at the
It's
end,
funding our soft landing program to help other SEALs.
well, and that's why I'm here. I'm hoping that what I have and what I offer inspire some kind of fire into them to see that there's true value in life if you want
Well,
to
that's
live
an
it.
interesting thing. So there's been some dialogue internally. This step 6 tradition, right?
Hmm.
We're not making any money off of SEAL and AA. Our SEAL AA money does not make money. We contribute to it.
No, you're hustling to get it, and I'm well aware of
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So I went through this whole thing with my sponsor about when I started this thing and started taking donations, and they're like, "This is SEALs in recovery. If you help one person, it's worth everything. We've helped more than one person."
And that's where we ended up.
Yeah, yeah. So
What's the motivation? Yeah, I mean, one of the simplest
you don't think
tools that.
these speakers that speak on YouTube and stuff aren't getting their everything paid for to go speak somewhere?
Oh, I don't know. I don't give a fuck. I mean,
No, but my point is they do. I know. I know the AA thing pretty much. When they go to conventions and they have these guest speakers that are big AA people and everything else, of course their freight's being paid for.
are they making bank off of that?
I know everything's paid for.
I know that they get, yeah, I know that they get the trip paid for and the exposure and they get mileage and stuff. I was aware of that. I mean, I tried a GSR. I'm a GSR rep for
Yeah.
one of the rooms that I frequent, and I'm aware of that. It just, if I didn't think about it, would it be authentic?
No, I thought about it before I started the whole thing.
No doubt. And, you know, you go back to what John Boy says, there's three types of team guys, you know, those that did it, those that trying to support those that did it, and those that benefit from it. And you know, at the end of the day, that's the establishment of how we're cheering this. I just wanted to be part of something fucking great.
No, it
And
is. I mean, the dollar donations once a week doesn't pay for co-pays to guys to go to Farley or a treatment center. That's the bottom line. So
at the end of the day, and I'd love to talk more personally on this because
yeah,
it'd be
yeah,
completely off the cuff, and I don't want to raise, questions on motivations and stuff. But my own personal thing is always to run through my mind, what's your motive in this? And I think that you do the same thing.
I do.
I'm not belittling that to any degree, but it did put me in a position where I was like, hey, you know, he asked me to do this, and I'm more in tune with what God wills for me now than I ever was.
Mhm.
I mean, did God will me to be a team guy? I don't fucking know, John. I know it made me who I am, and I had a whole plethora of problems with that. You know, you have these people that go into AA and hey, at least I'm sober, or yeah,
Yeah.
and they're 10 years clean, yet they haven't fucking worked a step yet. And then you have these people that are drinking every day that are trying to work the steps and everything in between. We as team guys seem to see things worst case scenario, best case scenario. We know the truth is going to lie somewhere in that gray differential. Um, I know that when I made a decision to be a team guy, it was simply based on the fact that I was strong in the water, and these guys were the best of the best.
Mhm.
And there was very little literature out there other than the only book that I could find when I was a kid was Men with Green Faces.
Yeah.
And that was my hallmark on, you know, what are these fucking frogmen? And those guys years later were the guys' reputations that I was trying to emulate. I was trying to protect. I was trying to be the silent professional, like we were always called. There was a whole, yeah, you got my mind going back to in our BUDS class, and I don't know if you did this. We started with exactly 100 people in 163. Exactly 100 people. And we went and we saw the psychiatrist. She was smoking ass hot. She was like 24 years old, blonde girl. And, you know, you got 100 swinging dicks going in there to talk to her about this. And I was like 77 or 78 or something. When I went in there, I was like, so who am I? You know, after you give me this big, long question. And I actually said, hey, I'm not going to bother to ask for your number like the rest of the guys did. You're probably sick to death of that. But I do want to know who I am now that I've taken this test. And she said, you're a sociopathic deviant with manic energy. And I said, you know, as I was was I 17 or 18? I was young when I started. I may have been 17 still. So I said, hey, can you just tell me in English what that means? And she said, if you weren't here, you'd be in prison. And I was like, oh, okay. Did it find me or did I find it, John? I mean, I often struggle, and I mean, you've heard my dude being a dude, playing a dude speech, you know. I'm trying more every day not to be what people would think I would be, the tough guy, SEAL team guy that can go and take your heart out with a spoon or whatever their stereotypical image of a team guy is. And I struggled with that for years. I mean, I got out of the teams and I struggled with it for 30 plus years up to this day where I'm like, hey, how did that decision affect or impact what I'm doing now? I know this, John. I know that I sent a guy out to California that has having problems here. When I was running my business, I was networked with him. He was a personal trainer and he got in trouble. I said, hey, go visit your brother. He sent me a link to the UDT SEAL Foundation. And he said, you're never going to guess where I'm working. And I was like, well, no shit. You just sent me the link. You're working at UDT. I know that. I scrolled down to the bottom of that page and it said something to the effect, if you're struggling, call JH. And I called your fucking number.
You
And
did.
I had a fifth of bourbon in my hand that was 2 fingers. It had 2 fingers of booze left in it. I had a 45 to my head. And I was ready to fucking pass on.
I
And the
wasn't
only
ready
reason
for that.
The only reason I didn't do it was I had my 17-year-old who was 15 then. He was coming home, and I didn't want him to find the mess that I found my father in, being drunk when he came home. I didn't want him to have to look at the blood and it, yeah, I mean, you were talking about the body drags and how that required the switch, because it's just like, hey, that's life, dude. You know, the guy's dead and somebody's got to go get him, and not a normal thought, you know. And I didn't want my kid to come in and have to deal with the rest of his days going, hey, you know, I fucking found my father dead there. I called you, and within 3 minutes, I got a telephone call back, and you said, where the fuck have you been? That was the first words. Where the fuck have you been? And I haven't seen you in 30 fucking years, man. Probably 32
early
by
90s,
now.
91, 92.
That's it. And that was enough of a gift, and I believe it to be God given, to keep me going and wanting to become the person that's in that book. I mean, that's the truth of it. I think all of us as team guys have this idea of a virtuous, principle-based person, and I tried to play that as the tough guy role, and it didn't work. I don't know whether I had to switch on while I was doing that, but I authentically want to have a life that's guided by the principles and virtues that are offered in that big book. Now they coincide with what's going on with the Bible, and because of my past dealing with the Catholic Church and getting hit with the end on edge of a ruler and told that I wasn't enough and saying that I was a misfit and a hooligan and I had no place in a Catholic based environment. I don't know, but I know that in the book it's about spirituality. I know that before I got on this call, I sat down on my knees and I had tears in my eyes because I was saying the St. Francis prayer because of all the things that I could be. And I try to be now more than I ever have in the past. And I know that when I go into rooms, people want to give me things that I'm deficient in, and I also offer to others things that they wouldn't ordinarily experience for themselves. And there's a huge difference between the rhetoric of hearing something and feeling the message. And I started to feel more now about things, good and bad, both good and bad things. And that feeling I construe as God's way of talking to me. That's how I put this together. And the process of me putting my heart and my mind together in a place called my soul is my responsibility. And I can do that honestly. I can do that very clumsily, or I can not do it at all and put no effort into it. I know that the more that I clumsily go about doing this, the better version of me that I'm becoming. And that has nothing to do with anything other than me believing through others that it can be done. That's where I discovered it. I mean, you referenced Doug and you referenced Evan and I referenced Johnny Rotten. John boy, I talked to this morning. I was like, hey, dude, you inspire. It's amazing to me the difference that we can see in others as opposed to when we are holding that mirror up to ourselves. But I know that I can do better tomorrow than I did today. And I know that today was a lot better than I was doing 10 years ago when I was running, gunning, drinking. And the drink was always, for those of you that have problems out there with some kind of dry product, the drink is always the precursor. I can remember, and I had enough money to where I could call a guy and have him delivered to my house, but I never did that. Never did that unless I had a drink first. I mean, even during my weed habit that I did daily, there was always a drink that I took before I called the guy to say, hey, can you come drop a Z off at my house? I think one influences the other, and I'm very, very crystal clear in my mind to how that worked. I know that when I put alcohol away, I know that I had a hole in me. And I remember being on deployment and I think we were in a Quonset hut. So, we were spoiled at first. The first deployment I did, we went down there and we stayed in a debt building above an office or some. I forget what was down there, medical or dental or something. But we stayed. We had our own barracks up there. You remember that building where you walk
Where
through
in
the?
Puerto Rico or
No,
where?
no, down at Panama.
Oh, I went to Panama contingency thing right after Just Cause because some guys at SEAL Team 4 fucked up. So we got to go down
Imagine
there.
that. Imagine that.
Yeah, we got plugged in. So I went down there when we lived up in a canal for like, I don't know, 10 or 11 days and did a bunch of riverine shit. And yeah, it was good. It was good. My deployments were in Stuttgart, of course, and then a couple of them in Machrihanish, Scotland. And
Okay.
there's some contingency stuff. Talk about, you would reference, and I want to circle back, as Jen Psaki would say, not a fan of hers, but that's what she would say. About, you said that some team guys had tried to help you, and you don't know, you think about that, and I think it's important because there was
Making
people
me
like,
squirm, brother.
what's that?
You're making me squirm.
No, but
Yeah,
this is
I'd
an
love
important
to.
part because there's markers through our whole life. It's not. Let me get my words straight. It's not exclusive to just the SEAL helping. The people have markers their whole life about people who tried to help and you just didn't see it. And you look back and like, God damn.
I know better. I
What
know
do we
better
talk,
for
what do we
me.
talk about the third step? Will.
That's it. How many? God, man. The very first one and most memorable. Am I allowed to say
Yes, of
names or should I
course.
just keep it fucking Snake, Rilo?
Wow. I work with Rilo doing OGA stuff at Ocean Hunter.
Yeah, he won't talk
Years
to me to
later.
this day. I tried to get his telephone number to make amends to him. If you see this, Rilo, fuck, dude, you are everything to me.
Well, if he can accept a
Fuck.
phone call or accept an amends, that's his problem. That's yours. We make amends for the text.
No, and I'm totally at peace with it. But those opportunities where you're like, how did I fuck that up? He told me back then. Wes Plank, I got a fucking issue. I got an issue. I never accepted I had an issue. I just drink to be absent from it.
Yeah.
And
We all
that
did.
ties directly to that. You get me? I haven't felt freaking nervous in a really long time, bro. This has got me in a quandary. Rilo choked me out one night in the bathroom of that same barracks that I was referencing earlier. First deployment, drunker than I cared to. I can't even remember, but I remember being choked out, and I remember saying, "Hey, this is a problem." Rilo telling me, "Don't be like me. Don't let this be a problem for you. Don't let this hamper what you can be." And for those of you that don't know, Rilo is one of the most spectacular operators and
Phenomenal guy. Yep.
somebody that every shooter should want to be like. And I was a comms rep in Delta, and Rilo was kind of my mentor at that point. So we spent a lot of time together, And it's funny because I actually took like an old man bath last night with hot water and shit. And I was thinking about this podcast, and the difference between me now and then. But I was sitting in there and I was like, I can remember guys walking out after we've been in the field for that doesn't fucking a week, 2 weeks, whatever. And I was the comm guy, and I would be outside and I would be cleaning the radios up, take care of your gear, and your gear will take care of you, based concepts that is ingrained into you as a SEAL team operator. Sitting out there and I'm cleaning my comm gear, and the guys were coming out that, like the point man, Troy would walk out and he'd go, "God, you smell like garbage." And I'm like, man, I got to take care of my shit. And he had already showered and came out. And that's the difference in me today versus back then. And I just kind of, I don't know if that means anything to anyone, but I was kind of chuckling in my own head, like, man, you cleaned up a whole bunch.
You
Um,
have.
and and that's the difference, because that stank that you have after being in the field for whatever duration of time, um, it's so foul and you don't even know it. Like, I'd be sitting out there in my own shit, cleaning my radios, and I don't know how bad I smell until Troy walks by and he's fresh out of the shower. And I'm like, dude, you must feel pretty good. And that's the difference that this does, but it comes at a price, just like everything. Um, this is painful, and one of my most favorite things that I hear when I first came into the rooms is, hey, in sobriety, especially in early sobriety, you ain't found your bottom yet. You're just finding it a lot slower. And I find that to be really true, as you pointed out upon. I'm I'm a dad. I'm a former business owner. I've done a little bit of everything. All that's kind of coming to an end, and I don't know what the next chapter has in store. And I get it in my head a lot. But for the first time in my life, I've got a reprieve where that gerbil wheel doesn't start running in the anxiety driven. I'm at a point where, and I'm one of those that have a problem with the promises, because I think it builds expectation, especially for a person early in sobriety. Again, the renegade in me is just like, hey, don't put promises out there for people and tell them that they don't have to work. We say it at the end of reading the promises, hey, you got to work, but how many people actually work?
I don't know,
You
I'm like
know,
you, dude. I had a paper out when I was 10 years old,
yeah, I've been
28,
working
28 dailies and I think 32 Sundays for Newsday. I mean, I shoveled snow. I always hustled. I
mowed
always had money in
grass.
my pocket,
Yeah.
clammed, had my own clam boat. I always hustled. Eventually, opened my own business. But no, I get the working part. Now, I don't. So the promises, it's very interesting. So I guess the promises to everybody individually are relative, right? What this is a
I
pet
think
peeve,
it's an
brother.
expectation.
Yes, this is a pet peeve of mine. So, and this type of AA person. Um, and I'll just metaphorically, oh yeah, I was a Wall Street executive. I had a great house, kids in private school, great cars, business expense account. I lost it all and I have nothing and I'm happy. What message are you sending to somebody in new sobriety that has nothing, and this guy has been sober for 10 years and wants nothing? And I immediately chime in about this is just a
Yeah.
poor message. Then why are you sober? To have nothing? Well, you read behind the lines with this guy who lost everything. You know, he really never had anything to start. He's bullshitting. So he's trying to give away stuff that he actually never had. But
That's
some of the
exactly the
some of the
message that,
messaging in AA is diabolical
yeah, it
to
is.
the newcomer. To me, always. That's why my share was very short last night. There's tenure in the rooms now. There isn't any raw
And
people. But
characters.
the thing is it's about the newcomer. I don't know what I love working with sponsees. I don't know what new sobriety looks like or feels like. I haven't drank in almost 14 years. I mean, I haven't had newcomer problems. So that's why it's invigorating to work with new people and to help. And Dan's he got out of his rehab and working with him as a sponsor and another SEAL, and it's invigorating. But this the higher brow stuff, to me, some of the meetings get away from themselves, and it is about the newcomer and what the newcomer can understand. You want to go to a book study or whatever meditation stuff, but these 101 meetings that are open are supposed to be geared a lot towards a newcomer, in my opinion.
Yeah. On that note, my home group, if there's a newcomer in the room, we always do step one. And the popular consensus in that home group, which is, and I don't understand this scaling of drunks, high end, low end, I don't understand that. I know that a drunk is a drunk is a drunk. But I go to what they call a low end group of drunks on a continual basis. And I actually struggle with that recently because in early sobriety, I'm not so sure that I'm not supposed to be investing more in me so I can be a better version of myself and understand this. And it is a very layered effect it has. On our meeting last night, I went back to my old school 12 and 12 that had the original underlined statements. I actually want to impress all my team guy buddies and show them, the volume of knowledge. I opened the meeting introducing this idea, this volume of knowledge that I have, and impress everybody. But at the end of the day, I took 4 hours of work and I threw it in the garbage can. And I just said, hey, I'm going to go back to how I understood it when it first started. I went to the key points of, hey, I got to be willing to do this. I can't do it under duress. I have to accept my relationship with something aside and put my trust somewhere. It started off as my buddies at Seals in Recovery is where it started for me. It was the first place that I went, and I didn't feel so fucking alone. I felt like my bullshit was understood in a way that wasn't understood anywhere else. And I continue to go back and try. I'm also one of the guys that says, hey, up front, I think I've even sent you text messaging while we were in the fucking meeting. Hey, back off on the God shit. You're going to scare him away, because I had a huge problem with God.
I'm not that guy.
I was God. Yeah, I know you're not. But at the end of the day, you can it lost. Like I said, John,
Dudes did not come to our meetings because of it.
No, I picked
We've
up
lost guys along the way. They're doing okay, but they've had enough of it.
At the end of the day, you got to sort that for yourself, and you get into that investigative. Hey, I sat down and I said it last night in the meeting. Hey, I got down on my knees because someone suggested that I try it.
Yeah.
He said, throw your fucking keys under the bed. And then when you're down there getting your keys in the morning, pick them up. And while you're there, rip out a quick version of the Serenity Prayer. You got it memorized already. And I started doing it, and I started seeing that I'm the typical tester. I did it for 2 weeks, and then I stopped doing it for 2 weeks. And the 2 weeks that I had stopped, that freaking ambivalence, that warring faction in my head, pro and con, go drink, it started almost 2 days into the 2 weeks that I wasn't doing the brain. And I did it with intention. I did it to see, hey, am I getting any better, or is this being given to me? I found very quickly it was being given to me. Does that mean that that have great relationships everywhere I go? Absolutely not.
No, that's a farce. We can't all have great relationships. Everything, my one-on-one is my Catholicism is my Catholicism. Or I go to a Baptist church now. I like not having anything between me and God, and I think that's what the Baptist church does. I don't need an intermediary, a priest, or anything I will have my own relationship, and plus the resentments of the Catholic Church is still not dealing with what they're supposed to be dealing with. It's a big money making machine that plays around with religion. But in my opinion, so I keep my Catholicism, my religious beliefs out of AA. What my higher power is, you guys, and I've discussed this when we get on starting to get rabbit holes. My higher power is the accountability to you, and think, what is Rich doing today? What's Doug? What is Evan doing today? What are these guys? What is Dan? How's Dan doing with his kids in soccer practice? And this is my higher power that keeps me right. That with people of the same ilk trying to do the same things, but I specifically keep that out of AA. I had a very easy time with God. Getting out of a Humvee or or armored SUV or jumping out of a plane or diving in Norway, that's totally up to God. What happens to me when I believe when your ticket's punched, it's punched. Doesn't matter what you're doing. So, that's an easy belief for me. I've never been a foxhole prayer. I've always prayed. My relationship, with God, had strained in a lot of ways, taking away my sole provider, my mother in high school. How can God do this? Had one sponsor for 9.5 years. The guy dies the same thing my mother dies of. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. He names my next sponsor, who's my sponsor now, because who would be good for me. A lot of life is very interesting, my friend. It is definitely serendipitous. There's no question about that. And there was a
if we allow it to be.
synchronicity this morning on our thread. Well, there is synchronicity, not so much in the text that I read this morning. I believe in a real life synchronicity of why things happen. Why you got to the bottom of some page and you call me having no idea who it was. You know, no idea. And a commonality with friends, but I'll mention his name, Steve Wolf. There's many people that we have in common with connective tissue because of our tenure at BUDS and our time frame that make this connectors for life. And 30 years past, it's just the same as I saw you in the compound in the early 90s, which is a special thing with SEALs. That's probably with a lot of communities, but us. But the God thing's a tough one for people to handle in AA, man. And I don't push it upon anybody. It pushes more people away than it attracts. You know, that's just my opinion.
And Steve is kicking ass, yet he still questions, just like we all do. Hey, you know, am I doing the right thing? And I actually had a little conversation with him on the side note.
Yeah,
dude, he was with me through everything.
I know he was.
Steve was an incredible companion for all my years, and there was nothing more refreshing than reaching out. And it happened after I talked to you, after I got the question, where the fuck have you been for 30 years? I reached out to Steve, and Steve put together the class reunion for 164, and it was a smashing success. But all the while, it was so beautiful for me to observe him questioning, you know, am I doing the right thing? Because it makes it so human that I'm doing the same thing. And I'm like, Steve, of course you're doing, this is going to be a smash. You're doing it for reasons outside of yourself. And you shouldn't. And they're still texting back and forth on the whatever. I think they're on Signal, but they're still texting back and forth. Hey, I love the time, guys. And to bring that amount, I asked Steve, hey, we did a lot of shit together. Why am I going back through this? And Steve offered me some insight that I don't think could have been offered by anybody else but him. He said, hey, Richard, you're trying to go back to when you were at your strongest. And when you were at your strongest was when you and I were going to boards together, and they threw at us last minute, hey, you guys got to go through these boards. And do you want this opportunity? And he and I we chatted about it. And we got picked up very early on, didn't complete STT simply because there's a God moment, and it came at the expense of Chet and Mr. Edwards.
I know them both very well.
Yeah, Steve and I were actually pulled in out of SDT that we were in, and we were given an opportunity. I don't remember the time frame. I think that we had like 6 months at the team at the time, and you usually do a 1 year probation. And they were like, "Hey, are you guys up for it?" It was, Bud Farley and Rilo and a couple other great, spectacular, Mr. Lumpkin. They were all involved in this, and we jumped at the opportunity. Like, yeah, we'll take it on. If you think that we're capable, we'll be able to do it. And when I asked Steve, hey, what am I going through? Why am I struggling with this team guy shit? And he's just like, dude, you just want to go back to when you were at your strongest. And when you're at your strongest, you were ready to take the world on it. It meant the world to me. I mean, it meant, and that was after I had spoken with you on the telephone that night. And like, is that something I could do for myself? I mean, undeniably, that was God doing for me what I can't do for myself. And
do you still have that perspective?
Most definitely. I look for it. I honestly
do you have the perspective you look going back to these moments because that was your strongest? Is that your still perspective on that?
No, but it makes me aware and astute enough to say, hey, there are other times in your life, now being one. I'm in the middle of a huge change in my life. I mean, what I've learned about codependency is, and my big problem, my specific problem, is I've always plugged people into the place where God belonged, and that's part of my codependence. That's part of my codependent behavior. I've always put, for 30 years, it was my wife. Hey, anything I can do to please you, anything I can do to make your life better or make my life better. And that's bullshit. I have my own life and my own experience and my own feelings and what turns me on and turns me off. And I think there's, like I said, I read the St. Francis prayer, and it's a prayer of paradox to me. I want all of these things, yet I have to do the opposite in order to attain them. Whatever I want most, I must give away. If I want to be understood, then I have to understand first.
Of course.
And I also believe in the St. Martin's prayer. They say, hey, I hope that the fact that the desire to please you does in fact please you. That's the guide that I follow nowadays. And what I realized by analyzing the details in my life is I'm as strong as I am today as I was back then, probably more so. But I also can't take myself so freaking serious. I mean, I got a huge hiatus from that constant ambivalent gerbil wheel that you hear about in the rooms. I've had a reprieve from that. When my mind starts to go there, I feel a sharp pain in my side saying, dude, don't do that. And I'm able to do it. I'm able to circumvent that negative self-talk that puts me in a place where I'm going to say it very frankly. The solution was always being absent when I was drinking. That was my solution. That's not a solution. What it is, it's procrastinating on the things that are inevitable. And what I do in sobriety, what I feel in sobriety is I feel I have 3 options at the very least that don't involve booze. And one of the things that I despise most about what I hear in the rooms is the further along in sobriety I get, the closer to a drink I get. No,
That's bullshit.
no, that's freaking horse shit.
Well, there's a lot of, well, you know what I say, quite frequent. It's not Well People's Anonymous. So consider the source. Not so much
but
in
it
our
is,
room, because people
it's
can't
such
get out of line.
No. And we would put them in check in that capacity. Like, what the fuck does that mean? But at the end of the day, I always preface it with, I didn't get sober to be miserable as hell.
Oh,
No,
I go on about this too, and I haven't shared about it in a few weeks, maybe a month. Is like, there's people with a year or 2 of sobriety, which I totally admire, and I'm getting, nuggets from all the time. Then there's dudes that are 20, 30 years sober. I'm like, go drink, dude. I mean, I don't want nothing they have.
Here's $20. Mm-hmm.
Just it's why are you even sober? I'm sure it's more healthy. You're not going to get arrested for shit. But the thing is, like, you're fucking miserable, man. Give me a fuck. What I like to do with the misery meetings, I turn them right around to gratitude meetings. Like my dog died. The next person say, oh, I had 2 dogs and a cat that died. Oh my God. I had 2 dogs, a cat, and I wrecked my new car. And I'll just say, hey, John Hawley, alcoholic. I'm having a great day. I'm so gracious for this morning. This is such a great meeting. And you just see the giggles and a text come over and like, thank you. Because it's ridiculous, man.
Changing, but that's also, talk about a coming together of the worlds. You got a team guy mentality that's like, hey, let's find the good in where this bad lies. You can't give me a shitty situation, I'll do something to turn it around into a positive. And then you have the alcoholism side where everything is a negative. And I think that sobriety's afforded me that luxury to be able to say, sure, it's raining outside, but don't the trees need water? Don't need
what the damn difference is? And I just had an epiphany. Do you remember, I'm not going to name names, in our meeting about a month ago, newer guy came in and he was having problems with the kids and the education the kid was getting. Now, in a lot of civilian meetings, you would have had somebody share next. Yeah, that happened to my kid, and now my kid is a mess, and I don't know what to do. What do? We chime in. My kid had this, John, alcoholic. My kid had the same problems. This is what you might think about doing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
There is a solution.
Dan chimes in. I had this problem. Let's talk after the meeting. I know the whole system in public and private school to get my kid on an individual education program. That's the beautiful thing about our group, brother.
Huh?
They're not going to join in with the misery. They're going to try to flip that script and turn that frown upside down, bro.
but that's what it's all about. Find the
Yes.
good in find the good in what's being offered to you. And at the end of the day, I think that that's just getting stuck on what I want versus what God wills. And there's going to be problems no matter where you go. How you handle those problems is exactly how you build your own character. To me, that's
Let's
how
let's talk about your bottom, when you hit it, when you figured it out, what
we
you did
did.
immediately,
We did, and
and
I
what you're
called
doing now about it.
John Hawley. Insecurity probably. I in just recently in the past few months, I've really been analytical of myself, and I don't want to defer. I'm being a chicken shit. My bottom was laying on my floor in my way too expensive home, and my neighbor coming in and turning me on my side and pushing me against the wall so I didn't choke on my own vomit. Um, I I have what I call this connect the dots, and I think that a lot of us alcoholics are maybe too smart for our own good. And I actually sit in the rooms nowadays with my eyes closed, so I avoid this connect the dots type philosophy. But a lot of us have a projection problem in that we see reality. We see truly what's going on. And I saw some things in my own relationship that I didn't like, and I knew them to be true. And I think a lot of us as alcoholics, we know these things to be true, and that's why we drink. We want them. We just want to be absent from them. We want to turn them off. We want to pretend like they don't exist, and booze allows us that escape. I was in that situation myself in my own relationship. I wasn't being the version of myself that I was intended to be, and I think that my wife had had enough frustration in seeing, hey, dude, you're so much different than what you're being. I had been on a 12-year hiatus from drinking. I hadn't had a drink. But the funny thing about that is it still didn't stop me from putting a fifth away. I drank a fifth probably 3 nights in a row. And my neighbor finally came over and was like, dude, what the? My wife had left. Um, we were separated. And I was struggling with doing a business that I did and I kind of constructed and ran for her. As I said earlier, I plugged her in where God should be, just because I knew I could do it. And um, I did a very, very reasonable job of doing it, but I was miserable in doing it, though I didn't admit it to myself ever. I was just like, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm trying to do the next right thing. And I wasn't involved in the program at the time. I had been in and out, and I probably picked up a couple of white chips in that. But that was my bottom was that. And then the next night, I had the bottle on the table. I had done some dry product. I got that message from my boy Dustin out in California. He was working for UDT Seal Foundation. He's not a team guy or associated, but he was working for the foundation. And that's when I found your telephone number. So it was a very quick return to where I had left 12 years prior. I was a diver offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, and I did some shitty ass work down there because I was fucked up all the time. Um, a lot of things that I regret, a lot of people that I owe amends to. But on that end, I went right back into that where I was doing dry products and I was drinking. You know, I ran numbers. I was $96,000 into a habit one year when I was
It's pretty
diving.
strong. That's aggressive. I like it.
And that
It's very
was the case.
motivating.
The case of beer before I went out, because I had to drink before I went out, and
You
then
had
the
to
200
pregame it. You need a pregame.
$250 bill. But yeah, and that was when I went offshore. I was sober when I came home, and then that slowly moved into we took bailout bottles because we were hat divers. We took a bailout bottle, we put vodka in it, and then we put the cave out back on, and then you'd hang it upside down and pour the freaking vodka. That's how you know it. That's how you know that it's bad. Yeah, I can't go without a drink. But the lifestyle afforded that, and it was accepted. And if you want to get away from it, then you got to find people that aren't into that. And no matter where you go, you're going to find people that are into that. But that was my bottom. Throwing up, being found against the wall, so I didn't asphyxiate on my own vomit, and then calling you the next night, realizing that that the only thing I'm going to do is kill myself from here, whether that be by alcohol and me putting a bullet in my head. Yeah, and the realization that wanting to kill yourself as a backup plan is a really shitty backup plan. Um, and I still, to this day, I don't know where it's supposed to take me. I don't know. I'm in the midst of dissolving these businesses, and I've got some legal problems. I have a 50B that was probably justified put on me. So I'm waiting for those things to clear up. So I don't know
A
if I found.
50B?
Yeah, I got a restraining order from my wife.
Oh, okay.
My former wife. Like I said, I was divorced, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or something to that effect. But in all honesty, my wife loved me. I didn't love her. I did. Just because and that's part of the fourth step in the
How long were you
honesty.
married?
30 years, 28 years. We were together 30 years. 4 boys. Awesome boys at that.
Well, there's no doubt you're a good dad.
Spectacular additions to, and that was one of the things that, you hear these stories about where, like I said, one of my kids never saw me drink until the very end.
Yeah, I got one son, my oldest, and I had to make amends. I got some more work to do with my oldest son. He's older now. He's 25, and great kid, college athlete, national security degree, just waiting to get picked up by somebody.
And I love it when you brag.
I'm sorry. This is one thing I did do well.
Fuck yeah.
I bred some alpha males that are phenomenal athletes, and they're good. They're stand-up guys. My second kid remembers like getting me. We had in our old house. We had a nice built-in pool and an outside refrigerator, of course. And he remembers me telling him to go get me a beer, like when he's 5 or 6. My youngest son, he doesn't, never saw me drink. So.
Yeah, but what you're not.
What's that?
What you're not addressing is the difference in those stages was there was a time where you were doing it for other people, which is where we all kind of start off.
Yeah.
And then there's a time where you're like, no, I really, really need this. And if you in my humble opinion, I don't think that you ever get the full effect unless you're doing it because you have truly admitted to yourself, hey, this is me. I have to do it for me. I have to do it for my own growth.
I will agree with that, but I will tell you another philosophy I have that, me, I don't buy into every AA thing. You know that about Johnny Rotten.
Mm-hmm.
There's like, at the end of the day, 51% of you wants to be sober. You're good.
Yeah.
50.1%. You're good if you hold that line. Now, most of us want to be sober 100%. You hold that line. What do they say in the big book? At any means necessary to stay sober, right? Half measures avail nobody.
Nothing,
I believe in new sobriety. There's got to be a reason besides yourself to get sober.
Do tell.
Well, you talked about your childhood, right?
Yeah.
You talked about you don't want to be like your dad, right? You have these kids. Do you want your kids to be exposed? Did you want your kids to be exposed to this?
No, yes. I did everything I could.
So who are you doing it for? You or your kids? To start, before you get to your self-work.
Selfishly, I was doing it for me, John. Because I didn't want them to have the example that I had.
Right, hey, but what if you didn't have kids? Would you keep drinking?
Oh, I don't. I probably.
I'm not going to speculate, but my point is, a lot of people, besides somebody who makes a blanket statement to me, my opinion only, you have to do this for yourself, right? At the end of the day, you are doing yourself, but what's the precursor to do it for yourself? Was it something with the law, your family, your work? You love your kids, you love your wife. You wanted a course change.
Circumstance,
correct. Great word. Love it. So then you go back to yourself that this is my program. I got to do this selfish program for myself. Me thinking about sobriety has got to start first every day. If I got any shot at anything.
Yeah.
And my ritual is, I've said in my podcast, I wake up, I do a simple Our Father, I make a gratitude list, and then I meditate the best I know how for 5-10 minutes to get my shit straight. And that's every fucking day. That's my thing, right? That's what I do for myself. That's my ritual. So that being said is, it's a very individual program. I start with my sobriety, of course, my lovely wife, and then my kids. And, my ability to make money, to stay in a lifestyle that stresses me out most of the time, which I need to get off of that highway, as he would say, at some juncture. But you have to find a reason why, and for that person who just says blanketly, you got to do it for yourself. Well, you do have to do it for yourself. You're keeping yourself sober, but what is the circumstance? Which is a great question, which I'm going to incorporate into my questioning of who you're doing it for. Thank you very much for opening my mind.
Yeah, that wasn't much of a struggle.
No, but it's a perspective. It's a
Yeah,
perspective how you look
hey,
at it.
at the end of the day, there's a couple of keys that I didn't know, even running and gunning with the SEAL team boys, that yeah, you got to be honest, open, and willing. I never knew that. I did what was expected to impress
Dude,
the boys that I was running
how
with.
could you not be honest, open, and willing when you live with somebody for a year and a half?
There's still a
I
part
mean,
that's
there might be a
reserved,
little, but
and
you know everything about everybody in a
yeah,
platoon or assault team. There ain't nothing you don't know,
that's
dude. Come on.
but that's where it starts, right, John? It
Yeah.
starts
Oh
with,
yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
I called Steve up. I'm like, what the fuck is my problem, man? And he's like, and then he had his own war stories. And then it was great to hear, he struggled because Steve and I had this big gift of a plan, and he actually ran that plan. And I'm so proud of him. Steve was the kind of guy that would drag you to the Delta. We went and did Delta tryouts when we were down in Panama. And then they were like, hey, you guys are E4s. We can't consider you after we did the PT part. And it was just like, Steve was always on to the next best plan. And he was like, hey, I want to go do the PJs, and I
Yeah,
want to
no, he
get
was revolutionary. There was
well,
a
for
PJ
fucking
thing going
great.
on. There was that going on, and then everybody wanted to be a warrant officer pilot, helo pilot in the Army. Remember that whole thing?
Yeah.
Everybody's
But
doing that.
Steve went and ran it.
I
He
know he
went
did.
and
Well, he's always been
PG
that guy.
and now he's that and now he's doing exactly what the plan entailed. And he was just like, I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna be a doctor. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a great plan. Let's run it, Steve. And somewhere along there, I fell off, and Steve did great things. I don't know, in
They're
the
not
whole realm
falling
of
off. I don't believe this. They're falling off. I don't believe that one bit. I mean, but we've all had setbacks, and we can go into yours or not, and where you are now, that's fine. And before we close it out, but the thing is, I no longer look at stuff as setbacks, man. I mean, it's just what life is. I can't
no,
look at
that's the
other
God.
people's shit and say, and I struggle with my kids with that. I mean, there's things that go on in school and school sports and different things where you might not be a starter because of circumstances unbeknownst to you, politics. But you know what? You get to college, the college coach don't give a shit who your dad is and how much you donated. College coach is there. You got a son playing school lacrosse. He's there to win because he wants the next best paying job. If you ain't producing, you ain't playing, unless your last name is Harper or Rodriguez or something, where they're going to give you a little more of a leash because your dad played pro ball or played pro hockey or, even at BUDS we saw it. I mean, there was guys, I'm not going to mention names. There was guys in classes after me and talked to instructors that had tried to quit, but their dads were SEALs. And they're like, we're going to give you another chance. You sure you want to quit? I wouldn't they'd let me and you quit, So it exists everywhere. It's, it just what it is. One other thing I want to touch upon, because I think about this often, about being $1 late, a minute late and $1 short, is how many guys would have this helped that we've lost along the way? I can name Jerry Wagner, hung himself, opioids. Steve Scott, alcohol killed him. CIA buddy of mine that was a team guy and got out when ground branch, and then he went to Maritime and agency sent him to rehab down in Florida, and he got out. I took him to a few meetings. He said, oh, I got this. I've gotten everything my whole life. And he actually expired with your situation. He puked in his own bed next to his wife, and his wife didn't roll him over, done. He died and, died choking on his puke, turned blue and died. But I just think of the Jim Bulos who died. We had cleaned out his house. And I'm just, the guys we've lost along the way that we knew that could have been helped by this. Yeah. By this program. It's, it's really amazing. Now we're starting to get some traction within the community proper, both active duty and, on the foundation level, that they're understanding that this actually helps, the peer-to-peer stuff helps. It is so important that it wasn't just a passing ship in a night, SEALs in recovery, that we're actually doing things. And they're actually, maybe we have some indige people that are active duty in our group that are advocating for it, or some of the shrinks we're working with. And, we have connectivities with the doctors that call and ask about, hey, the patient's going to X. Can they call you? Absolutely, they can. So it's encouraging that the community is not shying away from the alcohol issue. They're embracing it a little. I think it's a really good thing, Rich.
I think it is, but I think it's married with the reputation that's at stake. I think that without John Hawley to call and me get in contact, where would I be? At the end of the day, it's all based on the availability that you're trying to give away what you received. And that's fundamental to the book. It's fundamental to any room that you walk into. I think that we're different in that regard because and why a lot of people seek my company out is because I'm not going to tell them what they want to hear. I'm not going to stamp their bullshit.
You're not going to co-sign it.
I'm not. I'm going to call them, and at the end of the day, those kinds of I think that there's a lot of people that need that in their life, where they're like, I know that you're not telling me, Rich, this really hurts my feelings, but
No.
I know that you're telling me to improve, and I'm like, fuck your feelings, man. And I think that goes back to a lot of the old timers perspective that I gravitate to those guys that have that old timers perspective. We're like, I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm here to save your life. I know that you saved my life. I know
dude, you made the call. Thank you very much for saying that. And I cherished the moment we had together.
If you weren't there, what would have happened? At the end of the day, and that's the resonance. My son would have found something that affected his entire life, and generationally that cascade would have happened. I'm a little bit too deep of a thinker about things like that.
I know you're a deep thinker.
But at the end of the day, I think that there is this message of I'm freely giving what was given to me. I think it's diminished by this overall compassion and white glove, tender care, love. I do like the saying that I'm gonna love you until you can love yourself, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be some hard friction in me pointing out truths in you that you don't see in yourself. And I think that that's very central to my program. I see John doing better, so I must be getting better. I don't see my own growth. I can look in the mirror every day.
I look at it all the time. When I see big breakthroughs, like when Jesse came back in the room.
Awesome.
Going, 7 rehabs. He wouldn't mind me saying that.
And shit, he was missed last night.
Yeah, he has to work. He got a real job. He's back in life. He's back on the highway of life.
The measurement holds
AA
true.
is designed to get you back out there in life, not to sit in a fucking room 5 meetings a day and drink some free coffee and some shitty donuts. Goddamn, get back on it. Get back on the fucking playing field, man. This is crazy. No, the growth is amazing. The growth is when you're helping other people. All these guys that I help, they're like, thank you so much. I said, the time is going to come where you got to help somebody else. And you just remember what I did, or what you interpret I did for you that helped you. And then you do that for somebody else. And that's all anybody could ever ask. And you know that because you've gotten it. I see the work you're doing in your groups. I see the preparedness you do for when you're doing something with our meeting. It reflects. I don't got to do anything anymore. I'm not gonna organize meetings. I'm not gonna lead a meeting. I did all that shit. I do enough service work on the side trying to keep this thing alive with the soft landing, which is unbelievably important. We got a guy into rehab. We got another guy into rehab a month ago. We've had some lost leaders. We're getting better at it, but the growth is absolutely, even this growth with John Boy is the way he handled the person he handled. He got him there and he learned a lot.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't just show up at a hospital to go visit somebody. And that was an issue at one point with the HIPAA thing. And we shared that in our meeting, but he learned a lot in that thing. The whole tolerance, he cut through the BS. He got the guy there and it's a nightmare. I've been there. I've been on the 12-step calls, man. They suck. Especially the guy's tanked up and truly hasn't hit his bottom. And he's fighting going there. God bless Doug with his patience with these people, because I'll facilitate it.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I'll facilitate the back end with the payments or the you know, wherever we can get a bed. I know the players, that's fine. But you know, some of this shit, I'm like, God damn, dude, surrender. You know, just surrender and go do your thing. No, it's a really good thing. But the thing is, like, you know, I know this. Like Dan R will say this. I'm not everybody's flavor. I know that. I'm going to tell you what time it is. And the window for helping somebody, and this has been less of a rub recently with the folks that we're connected with to get people into rehab, is team guys are team guys. Everybody's got their own shit. Team guys got their own stuff and their own egos. The window may be microscopically open for the guy to want help, so you have to get him to where he's going quick, because he might change in the next hour, the next day, the next 2 days. So that is an important thing with helping people and getting there, and that window and the willingness to get some help. You know, because the window shuts. You know what? Next thing, the guy's got a gun in his mouth, harms himself or harms some other people. That's the crux. That's the nexus. That's the mean low water. That is it for us, is that window being open to help the guy, because when it shuts, not just in our community, but other communities, it can go south very, very quickly.
You know, I believe in that regard, and this has been told to me. Hey, you're great with the new people, Rich. I make sure that I greet everyone and I remember their name at the very least. That's what I can do for people, because that really helped me. And I know as humans, we do what works for us first, and then we try to pull upon our wisdoms later. But I try to greet everybody that walks in the door. And what I do firmly believe is that when someone's ready, you can't say anything that's wrong. And when
I agree with that.
When somebody's not ready, you can't say anything that's right. And I'm not going to bamboo. But I also, as I closed the meeting last night, and I may have said already, I also use the God in me sees the God in you, John.
Correct.
That's always been the case.
I love that. I've never heard that before. I love it.
But I also had the bullshit Johnny Rotten filter on that. If the God in me doesn't see the God in you, the God in you doesn't exist yet. And I can't give him to you. You have to do that part for yourself. And that for me started with putting my keys under the bed and going through the motions of, hey, a lot of me was development of trust. Hey, I don't like who I am as a person. I don't want other people not to like me. So what I need to do is need to throw honesty up there and tell people who I think I truly am. And then the response and the resonance that I receive from that is really the most helpful aspect of it. Hey, I felt like that too. I felt like the lonely renegade. I felt like the liar, thief, thug. I felt all these deceitful things. And once I get that experience and I felt welcome, hey, then I have a launching platform to improve upon the things. But it goes back to me being brutally honest with myself first, and then sharing that with another human being, so they can at least say, hey, I felt that way too. Maybe we can do this, and maybe we can grow together. I think that has that, and I can't go this whole telephone or this whole interview and not give a shout out to my pal Ken, who isn't my sponsor, but a guy that did exactly what we're doing today for hours and hours after a meeting. 34-year veteran of the program that I connected with, that turned me on to these simple ideas and then held me accountable to it in the no bullshit type. And it was one of the few opportunities that he was afforded a luxury to call people out rather than treat them with kindness, because he's definitely dog-eared as a kind guy. But with me, he was very, very, no, I'm not buying that crap. This is what you need to do from my experience, and held me to the line. He was my swim buddy through a lot of this stuff and wasn't my sponsor. And I think that that's very, very inherent to the program, that you find a running partner to go through these things with, because it boils down to accountability. It boils down to holding yourself to a standard that you're giving to yourself, but allowing others to impact you. And I think that that's what we do really well in SEALs in recovery as well. There's no bullshit. There's no, hey, and I'm the guy that's totally comfortable with silence, because
so am I. I'll sit there. I don't need anybody to talk. That's part of the shtick.
At the end of the day, I call that resonance time, because what you're doing is you're saying, hey, how is this knowledge that's being shared in front of me applied to me, or does it apply to me? I mean, in my arrogant, egocentric self, hey, that doesn't matter to me. Or I'm reflecting and saying, hey, how can I make that useful to the way that I'm doing my daily life, or improving my conscious contact with God, or whatever the case may be. I think that the pauses are definitely a way for me to reflect on those things. And anymore, I haven't always been like this, but anymore, if there is that pause and I've got something more to share and I've already shared, fuck it, man, I'm running it.
I agree with that.
Because
And
somebody might.
the thing is, and wrap this up in a second. The thing is as you grow in any one of these programs and you want to share, or share whatever, is you get more cognizant about your shares and who they affect. You really do. I try to share about. I don't try to share about myself. When I share about myself, my sharing, I hope, resonates a lesson to somebody else in sobriety. I'm not going to share, I'm going to a golf tournament, or I want to share something that's going to resonate with somebody else in that group that might be struggling, or don't repeat what I did even in sobriety. Don't try to learn from the people in these rooms, because isn't that what it's about? There might be a hierarchy in numbers of days, but it doesn't make a difference with experience, because, like I said, there's guys with 20 years of sobriety I want nothing from, and guys with 1 or 2 years absolutely getting it and crushing it, raw but crushing it and getting it very quickly. And I will say one more thing, and I'll let you have the parting shot. I will say one more thing. I totally believe about you're ready or not. There is nothing. You know this. You've been sober a while. Hey, Rich, can you go talk to somebody about their drinking? No. I'll give him a meeting guide. There is nothing I can say till that guy wants to actually hear something. And then there's a guy that is absolutely ready, where you don't have to do much. Then say, meet me at a meeting, open your ears, shut your mouth. My 101 thing is, you want to work with me, read a doctor's opinion. Go to 7 meetings in 7 days. We're going to talk about the doctor's opinion. We'll talk about how it works, and we'll see what timeline works for you and your family. Because the thing is, people have real lives.
Yeah.
They have bills. They have wives. They have children. They have commitments. We have lawyer bills. We have licensing fees. We have podcasts to run. You can't spend all day, in an AA meeting, when you actually have to participate in life. And I've seen degradation in people's lives that they've screwed up their lives by going to way too many AA meetings, because everything falls to shit, including their family. I mean, it's craziness, man. I'm not saying don't go to a bunch of AA meetings, but when it becomes a problem, when you can't make $1 to pay your mortgage or your car payment or your kids' dental bills, you might want to think about balancing your life out. I'll shut up now. Let you, take the parting shot, brother.
Okay. Go back to fundamental team guy stuff. When I talk to people, I say, hey, rule number 1, get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's a nuance that I learned when I was a frog man, and it's very, very true within this program. And as far as soliciting newcomers, my best effort in that is when I chair meetings. At the end of every meeting, you say, hey, will everybody with a year or more of sobriety please raise their hand? At that point, most groups will say, raise your hand if you're willing to be a sponsor. Now, what I've done is I've done a bastardized form of this, because I do believe in exactly what you're saying. Hey, if you don't want it, you're not going to go after it and get it. And I don't think that there's a good message in AA that's projected to state that very clearly. So when we do the closing nuances in this, I say, with anybody with a year or more of sobriety, please raise your hand. And while everybody's got their hand raised, I said, if you're looking for a sponsor, those are the available sponsors that are out there. Because I don't think that there's a new guy class in how these rooms work. And I think that that's why you suggest, hey, if you want to take this serious enough for me to work with you, go to 7 meetings in 7 days, because you're trying to introduce the idea that these people need to go recon the rooms and find out how they fucking work.
100%.
That's, if you don't know, you don't know. But at the end of the day, if you're not ready to go and confront somebody and say, hey, I need help, I think that that's more important than admitting that I had a problem with alcohol, is that we as alcoholics get outside of ourselves and realize we don't know everything. We're not the end all be all. And the only way that we're going to improve is to be able to have that luxury of going, hey, John Hawley, can you sponsor me? Hey, Doug, can you sponsor me? Because it takes a large amount of courage to do that. But more important, it takes the drive and ambition to say, hey, I can no longer come up with the answers myself. I know I can't do this just me alone. And that's what I'll leave as a parting shot. I hope that there's more people that have that strength, courage, and the ability to allow other people to offer them the assistance that they need. But you got to want that inside. You've got to want it for yourself. And I'm so thankful that you had me. It's a huge compliment.
Oh, you're one of my favorite guys, man. You're a character guy.
Well, John, that remains to be seen. I'll allow you guys to hold me to that. I know that my life's improving. I know that I have peace, and the ambivalence, the co-factions fighting in my head, they've stopped. And when they haven't, I'm able to realize the spike in cortisol that starts that process, and I'm able to ebb it down. I'm grateful for that, because I don't want to be warring with myself and missing out on life, rather than being able to accept things for what they are and being at peace with it. So I hope that makes it to a lot of people. I know that I've never been approached by anybody in the SEALs in Recovery program for sponsorship, but I also as well know that I would love to live in Virginia Beach, so my ass is permanently in that room. I know that the meetings help me. I know that I wouldn't be here without my brothers, and I thank you for giving me the place to be an honest version of myself. It's pretty freaking cool.
No, you're awesome, man. I'm so glad you made that phone call. Terrific podcast. If you go to SEALs in Recovery webpage, sealsandrecovery.com, there's some testimonials on there. You'll be able to figure out which one's rich. It's very, very impactful, very wordy, and very well written. So please visit our online page. And the other thing, administratively, again, just if you're not subscribe, give us 5 stars so the algorithm gets out there. That's how it goes. And this is John Hawley, alcoholic from SEALs in Recovery. So have a great day.